The station air was thick with voices, footsteps, and the restless shuffle of luggage wheels scraping against the floor. Trains roared in and out, carrying lives forward, stealing them away. She stood still in the middle of it all, like an anchor in a rushing tide, her fingers tightening around a small leather suitcase. Its handle was worn, the stitching frayed, as if it had already carried too many unspoken journeys. The red scarf around her neck fluttered as the doors opened and cold night air slipped in, brushing against her skin. She pulled it closer, not for warmth but for steadiness. It had been a gift once. Now it felt like armor. She watched the departure board flicker, letters rearranging themselves into destinations she didn't care to read. What she searched for wasn't on the board. Her gaze caught on strangers, the woman wiping tears with the back of her hand, the boy clinging to his father's sleeve, the businessman checking his cracked watch for the 5th time. Each of them looked like they belonged to something. She felt suspended, neither arriving nor leaving. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't look. She knew what it was. Another message forwarded, another screenshot, another echo of his voice. Her mentor's words cutting her open in public, again and again. Her hand trembled, not from cold but from remembering. His laughter when he dismissed her work. The way he looked around the room, seeking approval from the audience as if humiliating her was entertainment. Childish. Amateur. Not worth the paper it's printed on. She had smiled, lips pressed thin, while inside something shattered like glass against stone. And yet, here she was, suitcase in hand. She had packed it in silence, her movements mechanical, her heartbeat anything but. A voice broke through the announcements. A little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve nearby, whispering, "Mama, is she lost?" She almost smiled. Lost? Maybe. But the word didn't sting the way it once did. She lifted her head, letting her scarf slip slightly, catching the cold again. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened glass of the station window. Tired eyes but sharp. Shaking hands but steady enough to hold on. She pressed her palm against the suitcase handle until her knuckles whitened. The train she hadn't planned to take screeched to a halt on the platform. Doors hissed open. The crowd surged forward. Her breath caught. Her phone buzzed again. Her fingers hovered. Then slowly she reached into her pocket. For a moment she thought of the red scarf, how it could either bind or release. The air around her shifted, and before she even realized it, she had stepped toward the train. The train's whistle echoed like a warning, sharp and hollow. She stood near the edge of the platform, suitcase by her side, scarf brushing against her cheek. People spilled in and out of the carriages around her. Families rushing together, lovers locking arms, friends pulling each other close. Everywhere embraces. Everywhere belonging. She lowered her eyes. For her there would be no one waiting. No hand reaching across the crowd. Just the suitcase. Its handle warm now from her grip. Its weight strangely heavier than the clothes inside. It was the same bag her father had once carried on his shoulders when he left for a job he never came back from. She remembered standing in the doorway as a child, tracing the stitching with her small fingers, asking him if the world would be kind to him. He had smiled, tired but gentle. "It's not about kindness, little one. It's about walking forward even when it isn't." Her throat tightened. That was the last memory of him. His back, the bag, the sound of rain against the tin roof. Now, years later, she was holding the same bag as if it were a question still unanswered. The announcement crackled overhead. Delay. Another 10 minutes. She exhaled slowly, caught between relief and dread. More time meant more thoughts, and her thoughts came like waves. She pulled her phone out despite herself. The messages glared back. Threads of her mentor's laughter twisted into cruel reposts online. His words multiplied, screenshot after screenshot. Strangers dissecting her work as if it were nothing more than a broken toy. A heat burned in her chest, shame crawling under her skin. Yet under that shame something else stirred. Anger. The kind that tasted metallic like blood from biting your lip too hard. The announcement board flickered again, letters trembling as though the station itself was restless. The delay stretched into silence, into a pause heavy enough to make her skin itch. She kept her hand on the suitcase, but her gaze, despite herself, slid back to the man. He was still there, half-shadowed under the dim station light. His coat looked too thin for the cold. His shoes, scuffed to the edge of tearing, spoke of miles walked without rest. When he shifted, his wallet slipped slightly from his pocket, and she caught the edge of a photograph pressed between the folds. A woman's smile blurred from years of being touched too often. She looked young, alive. The girl wondered if the man carried her face as armor, or as a wound. The scarf at her throat fluttered again with a sudden draft. Outside, the first drops of rain hit the glass roof, soft at first, then harder, a drumbeat over steel. Thunder growled faintly in the distance, like a warning not yet fulfilled. She tightened her grip on the suitcase. Leaving meant freedom, or at least escape. Staying meant risking something she couldn't name. But then why did her body refuse to move? The man's eyes found her again. Not demanding, not pitying, just steady. And in that steady look she felt something crack open. His silence mirrored hers. His tired shoes mirrored her father's bag. His photograph mirrored the memories she clung to, even when they cut her. It was like staring into an invisible mirror, seeing herself not in reflection, but in another soul worn down by loss. A voice inside her whispered, "Careful. This is how manipulation begins, through resemblance, through recognition." Another voice, softer but sharper, whispered back, "Or maybe this is fate. Maybe broken finds broken for a reason." Her phone vibrated again. Another message. She almost laughed. Here she was, drowning in storms inside a station, while the digital echo of her mentor's betrayal kept clawing at her pocket. His voice, his judgment, his shadow. She wanted to scream, to silence it, to prove him wrong in a way louder than words. The man shifted closer, not toward her but toward the train doors. He didn't speak, yet the space between them tightened. The whistle blew again, sharp against the rain's rhythm. People rushed forward, flooding the carriage with motion and noise. Her heart pounded. Step forward or step back. The scarf slipped from her shoulder. She grabbed for it, her fingers brushing the wet fabric just as thunder cracked overhead. The sound jolted her spine. When she looked up, the man was already on the steps of the train, half-turned as if waiting. Not calling her, not inviting, but waiting. Her suitcase felt heavier than stone. And still she didn't move. The rain hammered harder, each drop splintering against the station roof until it sounded like glass shattering overhead. She stepped back from the edge, breath quickening, suitcase slipping in her grip. For a moment she almost turned away, almost gave in to the trembling that told her to leave, to vanish into the night, to return to the silence of her room where humiliation could rot in private. Her knees weakened. The suitcase thudded softly against the floor. She pressed a hand to her scarf, clinging as if it were the only thread holding her together. Then movement. She looked up. The man was inside the carriage now, framed by the open door. For a moment she swore he was holding her scarf, though it was still wound around her neck. No, her eyes adjusted. He had bent down, lifting something small and frayed from the floor. The tassel of red yarn that had torn loose from her scarf days ago. He held it carefully, almost reverently, as if it were more than thread. Her chest ached. A child in the crowd tugged at her mother's coat and whispered loudly, "Why doesn't she go? Everyone else is moving." The words stung sharper than thunder. She could feel eyes brushing against her. Curious, impatient, quietly judgmental. To them she was just a girl paralyzed by indecision, blocking the way. The man didn't speak. He simply let the rain-dampened yarn rest in his palm, his gaze flickering toward her, steady as before. Her thoughts spiraled. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. They carry loss. They carry what others don't see. Her father's words echoed, "Walk forward even when it isn't kind." But what if forward meant straight into another wound? She bent down slowly, fingers brushing the handle of her suitcase again. Her reflection caught faintly in the wet platform tiles. A fractured image. Red scarf, shaking hands, eyes wide and hollow. Behind her, an older woman murmured to a companion, "She's afraid." You can see it in her back. Afraid. The word rang out like a verdict. Her throat tightened, tears threatening though none fell. She wanted to scream, to prove she wasn't weak, to tell them she was more than her mentor's cast-off, more than this hesitation. But her voice failed her. Only her eyes spoke, darting back toward the man. The doors hissed, warning of closure. Her heart lurched. One step forward too late. One step back too final. She gripped the suitcase so hard the handle bit into her skin. And still she stood there, suspended in the storm, her scarf trembling against the night air, as if caught between leaving and belonging. The train shuddered. Her silence screamed. The train lurched forward, but she remained rooted on the platform, the red scarf trembling against the storm. Her breath came sharp, shallow. She should have walked away. She should have left the moment the doors began to close. But then he stepped down again. The man. In his hand the small tassel of red yarn damp with rain. He pressed it between his fingers like a fragile relic. "Yours," he said softly. His voice wasn't rough nor smooth, just worn, as if it had carried too many unsaid things. Her hand moved instinctively, yet she couldn't take it. The sight of him holding it unsettled her. His gaze lingered, as though the thread meant more to him than to her. And when he finally tucked it carefully into his wallet, next to the photograph, her chest tightened in alarm. That photo. She had only glimpsed it before. Now, in the flicker of the station light, she saw clearly. The woman smiling in that photograph wore the same red scarf. Her stomach dropped. He noticed her stare. His hand closed over the wallet, slow, deliberate. But not fast enough to erase what she had seen. Rain hammered harder. Her mentor's voice rose unbidden in her memory. Childish. Amateur. Not worth the paper it's printed on. The cruel echo twisted, but now another voice tangled with it, her father's. Walk forward even when it isn't kind. Forward. Even when it isn't. The phrase rang in her chest like a bell, louder than thunder. Her phone buzzed again. She finally looked. A new email. Her fingers shook as she read the sender's name. The company she had applied to. The only one bold enough to consider her after her mentor had shredded her reputation. Her breath stopped. The message confirmed an interview. The address tomorrow. Her eyes flicked back to the man. The company's name, his name, appeared together at the bottom of the email signature. Not just an employee. Not just someone passing by. Owner. The world tilted like the platform had dropped out beneath her. The suitcase in her grip felt suddenly insignificant compared to the weight of this collision. The scarf, her scarf, wasn't only hers anymore. It belonged to a ghost she hadn't known existed. A daughter, maybe. A life he carried like silence, stitched into memory. Her pulse thundered louder than the storm. Fate or manipulation? Destiny or trap? It no longer mattered. Her knees steadied. She lifted the suitcase, stepped past the murmuring strangers, and walked toward the lit exit sign at the end of the platform. Every step was forward. Every step was no return. And at the top of the stairs, a door waited. She pushed it open. The interview room smelled of polished wood and rain-damp coats. Outside, the storm still raged, water streaking down the tall windows, making the city blur into trembling lines of light. She sat across the long table, her suitcase at her side, scarf folded neatly across her lap like a shield. When the door opened, he entered. Not as the silent stranger from the station, but as the owner, the man whose name glowed at the bottom of the email. His footsteps were calm, yet each one struck her chest like a gavel. He placed his wallet on the table, almost deliberately. The photograph peeked out. The red tassel of yarn rested beside it, like a thread binding memory to the present. For a long time he said nothing. Neither did she. The silence grew heavy, shaping itself into something larger than words. Finally he spoke. You remind me of her. The sentence was soft, but it split her open. Who? Her voice cracked despite her attempt to steady it. My daughter. His eyes dropped to the scarf in her lap. She used to wear one just like that. She believed the world could be kind. He paused, jaw tightening. It wasn't. Her throat tightened. In that instant she understood. He hadn't chosen to watch her at the station out of curiosity. He had been measuring shadows, comparing ghosts. "I'm not her," she whispered, though her hand still clutched the scarf as if it belonged to more than one story. "I know." His gaze met hers, unwavering. "That's why you're here. Because you're not her. And yet you carry the same fire. You know how to walk forward when it isn't kind." The words, her father's words, now reborn in another mouth, struck her with unbearable clarity. Her chest heaved. This was the moment to claim what had been taken from her. Dignity, voice, the right to exist beyond her mentor's shadow. She could reach for it now, step into the role he offered. But something inside shifted. A different strength. She looked at the suitcase, at the scarf, at the thread of red yarn still resting on the table. Slowly, she pushed the scarf toward him. "Keep it," she said. "You carried its weight longer than I did. I don't need it anymore." His eyes widened just for a breath. He nodded once, almost reverently, and folded the scarf beside the photo. The room was still. Yet inside her a storm was quieting. Not gone, never gone, but changed. She rose, suitcase in hand. She had walked into this room trembling, clinging. She walked out steady, unbound. At the threshold, she glanced back one final time. He was staring at the scarf, not at her. Not possession, not love, something in between. A man choosing her not for what she was to him, but for what she refused to surrender in herself. Outside, the rain had stopped. Not every stranger you help is meant to stay. But some leave you changed forever. The streets glistened after the storm, lamps bending their light into shallow puddles. She walked alone, suitcase rolling softly behind her, the sound almost comforting now. A steady rhythm instead of a weight. The night air carried a damp chill, yet she no longer clutched for warmth. Her scarf was gone, left behind in another man's hands, resting beside a photograph that wasn't hers to carry. Her own hands felt lighter, empty but not hollow. She paused under a street lamp, tilting her face to the dripping branches overhead. The sky was clearing, stars timidly appearing through thin clouds, fragile but determined. Her reflection shimmered in the water pooled at her feet, no longer fractured by hesitation, but still unfinished, still human. She remembered her father's voice, soft as rain. "It's not about kindness. It's about walking forward even when it isn't." And then, almost overlapping, the strangers. "You carry the same fire." Two voices from different lives. Yet somehow they had met inside her chest, no longer clashing but echoing in harmony. She reached into her suitcase once she reached her small rented room. Clothes unfolded, books stacked, notebooks scattered. At the bottom, the symbolic object, the worn leather suitcase itself, lay open. It seemed stretched from years of carrying other people's stories. She placed it gently under her desk, half in shadow, half in light, as though it too deserved to rest.
No scarf. No thread.
Just her. Her phone buzzed once more. She glanced at the screen. Messages she could open or ignore. For the first time, the choice did not burn. She let the phone rest face down on the table. "Sometimes love is not romance," she whispered into the quiet. "It's recognition." She wasn't sure if she meant her father, or the stranger, or herself staring back at her through the reflection in the rain. The night deepened. Somewhere a train wailed faintly, carrying others into their own storms and silences. She pulled the chair out, sat at her desk, and opened a blank page. Her pen trembled once, then steadied. The first stroke of ink felt like breathing after holding it too long. Not every story needs an ending. Some just need a beginning. She paused, pen hovering above the page, then smiled faintly, knowing the world outside would judge, dismiss, or misunderstand. And still she wrote. Because maybe strength wasn't about erasing scars. Maybe it was about carrying them until they glowed. She tightened her scarf again, as if it could hold her together. Across the platform she noticed a man. He was leaning against a column, coat draped loosely, eyes not fixed on her but not away either. His silence felt deliberate, like he had been watching without speaking. When their eyes met, briefly, he did not look away. He only tilted his head, as though studying the way she gripped her suitcase, the way her scarf whipped against the air. Her heart skipped. She turned first, pulling her gaze back to the train doors, pretending to be absorbed by the mechanical sigh of their opening and closing. But she could still feel his presence, steady, unspoken. The crowd shifted again, louder this time. Someone brushed against her shoulder. She caught her reflection in the glass of the carriage door. Eyes rimmed with unshed tears, but a faint curl tugging at her lip, like a smile that wasn't sure if it belonged. She hesitated, one foot on the platform, one step from boarding. The suitcase handle slipped in her hand. She froze.